Uncle Mark always traveled for work. Sarah knew it. It was part of his job at the big computer company. But this trip felt different. He seemed secretive. Usually, he'd show her brochures of the cities he visited, promising to bring her back a cool souvenir. This time, he just said, "Business trip. Won't be long." Mark wasn't really her uncle, he was her mom's best friend since college. But he'd always been like family. He taught her to ride her bike, helped her with her math homework, and even took her to see her first scary movie, with her mom's permission, of course. There was always a comfortable feeling around him, like a warm blanket on a cold day. But as Sarah got older, things started to feel different. She noticed how Mark looked at her sometimes, a lingering glance that made her cheeks flush. She didn't understand it, but she knew something was changing. He was still kind, still supportive, but there was a new undercurrent she couldn't quite name. The business trip, and his lack of openness, only added to that feeling. "So, where exactly is this super important business trip?" Sarah asked casually, leaning against the kitchen counter as Mark packed his suitcase. He hesitated, zipping up the bag. "Just a conference, Sarah. Nothing exciting. Downtown, you wouldn't know it." She raised an eyebrow. "Downtown where? Chicago? New York? Even Springfield has a downtown, Uncle Mark." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, it's the Regency Grand. Okay? Happy now?" The Regency Grand. Sarah knew that hotel. It was the fanciest one in the entire state, the kind of place celebrities stayed. Why would Mark be staying there for a computer conference? As soon as he left for the airport, Sarah was on her laptop. She found the Regency Grand's website, scrolling through pictures of its opulent lobby, sparkling pool, and luxurious suites. A plan started to form in her mind, a mischievous spark igniting within her. It was crazy, impulsive, and probably a terrible idea. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to do it. She needed to know what was really going on. She pretended to be engrossed in a book while Mark finalized the last-minute details of his trip, but her ears were perked, listening for any clue. The airline confirmation number, the cab company he called, even the way he sighed, everything felt significant. When he stepped away to take a phone call, she quickly glanced at his laptop screen. There it was, Regency Grand Hotel, confirmation. She snapped a quick picture with her phone, a thrill of adrenaline coursing through her veins. The next few hours were a blur of online research. She memorized the hotel layout, noting the location of the elevators, emergency exits, and, most importantly, the room numbers on Mark's floor. She even practiced her surprised and happy face in the mirror, making sure her smile looked genuine and not completely insane. Her biggest challenge was explaining her weekend plans to her mom. She told her she was staying at a friend's house for a party. A small lie, but a necessary one. The less her mom knew, the better. She packed a small bag, a mix of excitement and nervous energy bubbling inside her. This was either going to be the best or the worst idea she'd ever had. The bus ride felt like forever. Every bump in the road, every stop, stretched the journey out like taffy. Sarah stared out the window, replaying her 18th birthday in her mind. It had started like any other day, but the lack of a call or visit from Mark cast a long shadow over everything. She remembered making a small cake for herself, frosting it with shaky hands. Her mom had tried to cheer her up, but Sarah could see the pity in her eyes. It made everything worse. Later that evening, she scrolled through Instagram, seeing pictures of her friends celebrating their own birthdays with lavish parties and expensive gifts. A wave of loneliness washed over her. She felt invisible, forgotten. That night, she made a silent vow to herself. She wouldn't let anyone make her feel that way again. She would take control, be assertive, and get what she wanted. Mark's absence on her birthday had been the catalyst, the spark that ignited her current plan. It wasn't just about curiosity, it was about reclaiming something she felt she'd lost. It was about showing him, and maybe even herself, that she wasn't a little girl anymore. The bus coughed and sputtered as it pulled into the city's central station. Sarah stepped off, feeling the humid air cling to her skin. The Regency Grand loomed in the distance, a shimmering skyscraper that seemed to mock her audacity. She walked quickly, trying to blend in with the bustling crowd. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. She felt like a spy in a movie, dodging imaginary security cameras and whispering secrets to herself. Getting into the hotel was surprisingly easy. She simply walked through the revolving doors, acting like she belonged there. The lobby was even more extravagant than the pictures online, with crystal chandeliers, plush velvet furniture, and impeccably dressed guests. She found the elevators and pressed the button for Mark's floor. As the doors slid shut, she took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. This was it. There was no turning back now. She was about to confront Mark, and she had no idea what to expect. Excitement warred with a growing sense of dread. What if he was angry? What if she'd made a terrible mistake? The elevator lurched to a stop, and the doors opened onto a long, silent hallway. It was time. The hallway stretched before her, an endless expanse of beige carpet and identical wooden doors. It smelled faintly of lemon-scented cleaner and something else, stale air, perhaps? The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the distant hum of the hotel's ventilation system. Each step she took felt heavier than the last. Her palms were sweating, and she could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. She checked the room numbers, her eyes darting back and forth. 614. 616. 618, there it was. 620, Mark's room. She stopped in front of the door, her hand hovering over the cool metal handle. Doubt gnawed at her. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she should just turn around and go home. But then she remembered the text message, the empty feeling of her birthday, the way Mark had been acting lately. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and raised her hand. It was now or never. With a final surge of adrenaline, she knocked. The sound echoed in the silent hallway, each rap of her knuckles a thunderclap in her ears. Now all she could do was wait. The silence stretched, each second an eternity. Sarah held her breath, her heart pounding in her ears. She could hear muffled sounds from inside the room, a TV, maybe? Footsteps? She glanced down at her outfit. She'd chosen carefully, wanting to strike a balance between looking grown-up and innocent. A simple black dress that hugged her curves, paired with a cardigan to keep it from being too revealing. She'd added a touch of lip gloss and mascara, but nothing too dramatic. She forced a smile onto her face, the cheeky smile she'd practiced in the mirror. It felt strange, unnatural. She hoped it didn't look too forced. Finally, she heard the sound of the deadbolt turning. Her stomach clenched. The door creaked open, and there he was. Mark. He was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked tired, surprised. His eyes widened as he took in the sight of her standing in the hallway. For a moment, he just stared at her, speechless. The smile faltered on Sarah's face. This was it. The moment of truth. His face was a mask of disbelief. First, confusion furrowed his brow, as if he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. Then, his eyes widened in shock, his mouth slightly agape. He blinked several times, as if trying to clear his vision. Sarah, he finally managed to stammer, his voice hoarse. What are you doing here? The dawning recognition in his eyes was slow, but undeniable. It wasn't just confusion anymore. There was a flicker of something else there, something that made Sarah's stomach churn. Was it fear? Apprehension? Or something else entirely? He ran a hand through his already messy hair, his gaze flickering from her face to her body and back again. He seemed to be struggling to find the right words, to grasp the reality of the situation. The silence hung heavy in the air, thick with unspoken questions and simmering tension. He looked trapped, caught between surprise and something darker. His shoulders slumped slightly, as if the weight of the world had suddenly settled upon them. Taking a deep breath, Sarah plastered on her carefully rehearsed smile. "Happy belated birthday to me," she said, her voice a little too high-pitched. "I know it's been a few weeks, but I just wanted to celebrate with you. 18 is a big deal, you know?" She emphasized the word 18, letting it hang in the air between them. It was a subtle reminder that she wasn't a child anymore. She was a woman now, capable of making her own choices. Her excuse sounded flimsy, even to her own ears. But it was all she had. She needed to say something to break the tension, to fill the awkward silence. She tilted her head slightly, batting her eyelashes. "I missed you, Uncle Mark," she added, the uncle sounding almost like a question this time. The ambiguity of her intentions was palpable. Was she there to celebrate her birthday? Or was there something more to it? She left the question unanswered, letting Mark fill in the blanks with his own imagination. The air crackled with unspoken possibilities, both innocent and dangerous. Mark stood frozen in the doorway, his expression a battleground of conflicting emotions. His eyes darted back and forth, as if searching for an escape route. His jaw tightened, then relaxed, then tightened again. He knew he shouldn't let her in. It was wrong, inappropriate, potentially disastrous. He was responsible for her, in a way. He was her mom's best friend, practically family. He had a duty to protect her, not this. But there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, something that betrayed his inner turmoil. A spark of attraction, a hint of desire, a longing that he had tried so hard to suppress. He knew he was playing with fire. He knew he should shut the door, tell her to go home, pretend this never happened. But the temptation was almost unbearable. He had always been drawn to her, even when she was a little girl. Now that she was 18, beautiful, and standing right in front of him, it was almost impossible to resist. The battle raged within him, his conscience warring with his desires. He hesitated, just for a moment. But that moment was all Sarah needed. Without waiting for an invitation, Sarah stepped forward, her shoulder brushing against his as she moved past him. She walked into the room, taking control of the situation with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. Mark stumbled backward, caught off guard by her boldness. He watched her, speechless, as she surveyed the room, a small smile playing on her lips. He felt like he was losing control, like he was being swept away by a current he couldn't resist. She turned back to him, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of amusement and defiance. "Nice room, Uncle Mark," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Very businesslike." He was still reeling from her sudden entrance, his mind struggling to catch up with the rapidly changing situation. He didn't know what he had expected. But it certainly wasn't this. He was completely unprepared for Sarah's assertiveness, her willingness to push boundaries. He felt like a puppet, and she was pulling the strings. He closed the door slowly, the click echoing in the sudden quiet. The room was exactly what you'd expect from a high-end hotel, generic but luxurious. A king-sized bed dominated the space, covered in crisp white linens and a mountain of fluffy pillows. A large flat-screen TV hung on the wall opposite the bed, and a small desk sat beneath it, cluttered with papers and a laptop. A mini fridge hummed quietly in the corner, and a coffee maker sat on a small table next to it. The curtains were drawn, casting the room in a soft, muted light. It was clean and impersonal, devoid of any personal touches that might reveal anything about its occupant. Despite the neutrality of the setting, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Every object in the room seemed to vibrate with unspoken words and simmering desires. The air crackled with electricity, a silent storm brewing beneath the surface. The sterile environment only served to amplify the intensity of their interaction, highlighting the inappropriateness of their presence together. It was a stage set for a drama that was about to unfold. "So," Sarah said, breaking the silence, "how's the conference going?" Mark shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair again. "It's fine. You know, conferences. Lots of PowerPoints and lukewarm coffee." "Sounds thrilling," she replied, her voice laced with sarcasm. She walked over to the window and peeked through a gap in the curtains. Nice view. Bet you can see the whole city from up here. Yeah, it's okay, he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. She turned back to him, her eyes narrowed. You seem distracted, Uncle Mark. Everything all right? He hesitated. Of course. Why wouldn't it be? She smirked. Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that I just showed up unannounced at your fancy hotel room. Or maybe it's something else entirely. She walked closer to him, her voice dropping to a whisper. You know, for 18, I'm pretty observant. She leaned in, close enough for him to smell her perfume. And I've noticed a few things lately. He swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on hers. The unspoken desires hung heavy in the air, threatening to suffocate them both. A memory flickered in Mark's mind, unbidden and unwelcome. Sarah was maybe 10 years old, dressed in a princess costume for Halloween. He remembered kneeling down to adjust her plastic tiara, his fingers brushing against her hair. She'd giggled and wrapped her arms around his neck, giving him a quick hug. At the time, it had seemed perfectly innocent. A sweet moment between a child and a caring adult. But now, looking back on it, he saw it in a different light. There had been a certain possessiveness in her hug, a subtle clinginess that he hadn't noticed before. He remembered other moments too, carrying her on his shoulders at the park, reading her bedtime stories, letting her sit on his lap while they watched movies. All seemingly innocent gestures, but now tainted with a sense of unease. Had he been crossing lines without realizing it? Had he been encouraging her affection in ways that were inappropriate? The memory made his stomach churn with guilt and self-disgust. He had to put a stop to this. He had to regain control of the situation before it spiraled completely out of control. He stepped back from Sarah, putting some distance between them. Sarah, Mark said, his voice firm but strained, I think you need to leave. She raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. Leave? But I just got here. And we haven't even had a chance to celebrate my birthday yet. That's not what this is about, and you know it, he said, his gaze unwavering. I'm not stupid, Sarah. I know you didn't come all this way just for a belated birthday celebration. He took another step back, creating even more distance between them. I'm not comfortable with this, Sarah. You're 18 now, yes, but I've known you since you were a child. I'm like family to you. This is wrong. He paused, searching for the right words. I care about you, Sarah. I always have. But what you're doing, it's not fair to me, and it's not fair to yourself. You deserve better than this. He looked at her, his eyes filled with genuine concern. Please, just go home. Before things get even more complicated. Her facade of confidence crumbled. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision. You don't understand, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'm so lonely, Mark. She looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously. Ever since I turned 18, everything's been different. You've been different. She looked up at him, her eyes pleading. I know it's wrong, I know it's stupid, but I want you to see me as something more than just your friend's daughter. I want you to notice me. She took a shaky breath. I know you think I deserve better, but what if you're what I want? What if I'm tired of being treated like a kid? What if I want something more? She let the question hang in the air, her vulnerability laid bare before him. The carefully constructed image of the confident, assertive woman had vanished, replaced by the raw, desperate emotions of a young woman searching for connection and attention. The tears streamed down her face now, unchecked and unashamed. I just wanted you to care, she sobbed. I just wanted you to be here for my birthday. Mark's resolve wavered. Seeing her so vulnerable, so heartbroken, triggered something deep inside him. The protective instincts he had always felt for her, the desire to shield her from harm, surged to the surface. He had always seen her as someone to be cared for, someone to be nurtured. Now, seeing her pain, he felt an overwhelming urge to comfort her, to make her feel better. Her vulnerability shifted the power dynamic between them. He was no longer the responsible adult, lecturing a wayward child. He was now a confidant, a potential savior. He reached out and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "Sarah," he said softly, his voice filled with compassion. "Don't cry. I didn't realize you were feeling this way." He pulled her closer, almost instinctively. He knew he shouldn't, that it was wrong, but he couldn't help himself. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Her body trembled against his, and he felt a surge of something he couldn't quite name. It was a mix of protectiveness, desire, and a deep, unsettling guilt. He knew he was treading on dangerous ground, but he couldn't seem to stop himself. The dam broke. In a moment of weakness, fueled by a potent mix of pity, desire, and guilt, Mark tilted her chin up and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was hesitant at first, a tentative exploration of forbidden territory. But as her lips softened beneath his, he deepened the kiss, succumbing to the temptation he had fought so hard to resist. He tasted the salt of her tears, the sweetness of her lip gloss, the intoxicating vulnerability that had drawn him in. He closed his eyes, losing himself in the moment, forgetting everything but the feel of her in his arms. The kiss was a surrender, a confession of unspoken desires, a transgression that could never be undone. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated weakness, a crossing of the line that would forever alter the course of their relationship. He pulled her closer, his arms tightening around her, his body betraying his earlier intentions. For that brief, fleeting moment, nothing else mattered. Only the taste of her lips, the feel of her body, the intoxicating allure of the forbidden. The moment their lips parted, the spell broke. A wave of nausea washed over Mark, followed by an overwhelming sense of regret and self-disgust. What had he done? He stumbled backward, his hands flying to his mouth as if to wipe away the kiss, to erase the memory of his transgression. He stared at Sarah, his eyes wide with horror. I'm so sorry," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "I shouldn't have done that. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake." He felt a profound sense of shame, a deep-seated guilt that threatened to consume him. He had betrayed Sarah, he had betrayed her mother, he had betrayed his own moral code. He was no better than a predator, preying on a vulnerable young woman. He turned away from her, unable to meet her gaze. He felt sick to his stomach, his head pounding with regret. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The brief moment of pleasure had been replaced by a crushing weight of guilt and self-loathing. He was disgusted with himself, with his weakness, with his inability to control his own desires. Sarah's reaction was difficult to read. At first, there was a flicker of hurt in her eyes, a brief flash of disappointment that quickly morphed into something else. Was it anger? Confusion? Or something akin to understanding? She stepped back from him, her face unreadable. She didn't say a word, didn't make a sound. She simply stared at him, her expression a blank canvas. He expected tears, accusations, maybe even a slap. But there was nothing. Just a chilling silence that spoke volumes. He wondered if she was shocked, hurt, or perhaps even relieved. He watched her, his heart pounding in his chest, waiting for her to react, to say something, anything. But she remained silent, her gaze fixed on him, her eyes searching his soul. He couldn't decipher what she was thinking, what she was feeling. It was as if she had retreated into herself, shutting him out completely. The silence stretched between them, an unbearable weight that threatened to crush them both. He braced himself for the storm that he knew was coming, but it never arrived. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioner. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with unspoken words and regret. Mark stood frozen, his back to Sarah, his shoulders slumped with the weight of his actions. Sarah remained motionless, her expression unreadable, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond him. The kiss hung between them, a tangible presence that couldn't be ignored, couldn't be erased. Every object in the room seemed to amplify the awkwardness, the inappropriateness of their situation. The pristine white bed, the impersonal artwork, the sterile atmosphere, all served as a stark reminder of the line they had crossed. The weight of their actions pressed down on them, crushing them beneath its immense force. The unspoken words screamed in the silence, accusations, apologies, explanations that neither of them could bring themselves to voice. It was a moment of profound reckoning, a turning point that would forever alter the course of their relationship. They were trapped in the aftermath, prisoners of their own choices, with no easy way out. Without a word, without a glance, Sarah turned and walked towards the door. She didn't slam it, didn't storm out in anger. She simply opened it, stepped into the hallway, and closed it softly behind her. The silence in the room deepened, if that was even possible. Mark remained frozen, his back still turned to the door, listening to the sound of her footsteps fading down the hallway. He didn't know what she was thinking, where she was going, or what she would do next. All he knew was that she was gone, and the situation remained unresolved. The kiss, the confession, the vulnerability, all hung in the air, unanswered, unaddressed. He was left alone with his guilt, his regret, and the crushing weight of his actions. He had crossed a line, and now he had to face the consequences. But what were those consequences? He had no idea. All he knew was that Sarah was gone, and their relationship was irrevocably changed. The future stretched before him, uncertain and terrifying. He didn't know how to fix things, how to make amends, or even if it was possible. Mark finally turned around, his gaze sweeping over the room, taking in the pristine white bed, the impersonal artwork, the sterile atmosphere. It all felt mocking, a cruel reminder of his transgression. He sank onto the edge of the bed, his head in his hands, his body racked with sobs. He had made a terrible mistake, and he didn't know how to fix it. What would he tell Sarah's mother? How could he ever face her again? How could he explain his actions, his weakness, his utter lack of control? The potential consequences loomed large in his mind, the loss of his friendship with Sarah's mother, the shame of his actions being exposed, the damage to his reputation, the legal ramifications. He knew he had to do something, had to make amends, had to try to salvage the situation. But what? He was trapped in a web of his own making, with no clear path forward. He was alone, consumed by guilt and regret, facing a future that seemed bleak and uncertain. He closed his eyes, wishing he could turn back time, wishing he could erase the kiss, wishing he could undo the damage he had caused. But it was too late. The line had been crossed, and nothing would ever be the same again. The bus ride home was a blur. Sarah stared out the window, watching the city lights fade into the darkness. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Regret gnawed at her. Had she gone too far? Had she ruined everything? Had she misinterpreted Mark's feelings all along? Confusion swirled within her. What did the kiss mean? Was it a sign of reciprocated feelings? Or just a moment of weakness, a mistake he would soon regret? A strange sense of accomplishment mingled with the regret and confusion. She had finally confronted him, finally made him see her as something more than just a friend's daughter. She had asserted her independence, taken control of the situation, and forced him to acknowledge her desires. But at what cost? She had jeopardized their relationship, potentially destroyed the bond that had been so important to her for so many years. She didn't know what the future held, what Mark would say or do, or how her mother would react if she ever found out. All she knew was that she had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. She closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. The journey home felt long and arduous, a reflection of the emotional turmoil raging within her. She had sought clarity, but instead, she had found only more questions. The future stretched before them, shrouded in uncertainty. Would Mark confess everything to Sarah's mother? Would Sarah reveal the truth? Or would the kiss remain a secret, a dark cloud hanging over their relationship, unspoken and unaddressed? Would they ever be able to return to their former lives, to the comfortable familiarity of their uncle and niece dynamic? Or had they crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, forever altering the course of their lives? Would they address what happened, confront the unspoken desires and the simmering tension? Or would they pretend it never happened, burying the memory deep within their hearts, allowing it to fester and grow? The answers remained elusive, hanging in the balance, dependent on choices yet to be made. The future of their relationship teetered on a precipice, uncertain and precarious. Would they find a way to navigate the treacherous waters ahead? Or would they succumb to the weight of their actions, allowing their relationship to crumble and fade away? Only time would tell. The story ended not with a resolution, but with a question mark, a lingering sense of unease, and the unsettling realization that some lines, once crossed, can never be erased.